The lost continent of Atlantis, the most enigmatic mystery of all times. For centuries, the story of this mythical civilization has captivated the imagination of people around the world, with tales of advanced technology, great wealth, and untold treasures waiting to be discovered. But was Atlantis just a legend? Did it really exist? It is not by chance that we have been so intrigued by the legends of Atlantis, because in a certain sense our current race and civilization begins from the time of Atlantis. But where does this myth of this mysterious sunken island come from? One of the most famous and early mentions of Atlantis comes from the Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BC in two of his dialogues, Critias and Timaeus. Plato gave a detailed description of a country on a fertile land that he called Atlantis. He describes it as a vast island which, before sinking around 10,000 years BC, was located in the Atlantic Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which are generally thought to refer to the Strait of Gibraltar. His knowledge of Atlantis most likely came from Solon, an Athenian lawmaker and philosopher who around 600 BC, on a trip to Egypt, learned of a great civilization that has existed 9,000 years earlier. The subject of Atlantis fascinated Plato, and it is believed that in order to learn more, he consulted with students of Pythagoras and others who were familiar with the ancient mythological, historical, and geological knowledge. Undoubtedly, Plato received some of his knowledge from initiates who were members of secret brotherhoods guarding the ancient histories. In the past, as you know, these mystery schools kept wisdom from the uninitiated, as it helped ensure the safety of knowledge during danger. For most of his life, Plato refrained from writing about Atlantis. Only as he neared the end of his life did he pass on his information about the sunken continent in an attempt to ensure that the lost civilization's history is preserved. For his account of Atlantis, Plato also had access to ancient records such as those in the remarkable Library of Alexandria, which Edgar Cayce says was established by the Atlanteans in 10,300 BC. Plato's Atlantis was certainly a large island, perhaps the size of Western Europe, but by no means the size of an actual continent. According to him, it possessed an abundance of natural resources and was particularly rich in metals, including the famous and mysterious orichalcum. The capital of Atlantis was located on the south coast of the island and was connected to the sea by a huge canal. The city had a circular shape of 3 concentric rings separated by moats. The inner citadel was about 5 kilometers in diameter, but the entire wall area measured 23 kilometers. This made the city about twice the size of Imperial Rome. In the central island stood the Palace of the Kings and the main temple of Atlantis. In Plato's words, the Atlanteans possessed such an amount of wealth as had never before been possessed by kings and rulers, and is unlikely ever to be again. The few things which the city and island itself did not provide were brought to them from foreign countries because of the greatness of their empire. Plato's most famous dialogue about Atlantis, the Critias, unfortunately survives incomplete, but from another of his dialogues, the Laws, we learn that Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night due to a catastrophic event, and this fall was followed by a long dark age in which all the arts and sciences were lost. But can we trust Plato for his account of Atlantis? And do we know how the surface of the earth, and in particular the part around the northwest coast of Africa, looked like more than 12,000 years ago at the time of the supposed existence of Atlantis? Although Plato's account certainly provides interesting information about the existence of Atlantis, it still does not give us enough data as to where exactly Atlantis was located. To learn more, we must turn to geology and oceanography, to the study of the evolution of the world's oceans. It is theorized that Atlantis was a volcanic continent located in the mid-Atlantic Ridge region and primarily connected to Europe, Africa, and North America by temporary temporary land bridges. Atlantis has its great territorial expansion from 23 to 5.3 million years ago, when it formed an almost continuous landmass stretching from the northern Appalachian continent to the southern tip of Africa. Then, till its disappearance, Atlantis existed as two separate islands, a northern island, Ruda or Poseidonis, and a southern island, Daitya. The northern island of Poseidonis still existed as a substantial landmass until the last ice age, when it sank as a result of tectonic movements and a general rise in global sea levels. It is believed that the Azores and Madeira are some of the last parts of the Atlantic continent still above water. If we remove the waters of the ocean to see the bottom, the mid-Atlantic ridge would appear as a continuous mountain range, comparable in length to the Andes and Rockies of America combined, and in heights comparable to the Himalayas. Today's Azores, Madeiras, Cape Verde, and the Canary Islands represent only the highest peaks of this submerged chain. But was Atlantis really located there? During the Middle Ages, most ancient texts, including Plato's Legend of Atlantis, sank into oblivion. It wasn't until the Renaissance, when people began to look back and rediscover ancient knowledge, that interest in this sunken island resurfaced. Over the past 500 years, many different theories have emerged about a continent lost in the Atlantic Ocean. But do they match the story told by Plato, or do they hide within themselves another knowledge? And do we know who the Atlanteans really were? How was their civilization created? Were aliens involved in the origin of Atlantis, as many speculate? An interesting and a little bit more esoteric hypothesis about the origin of Atlantis comes from Ishmael Perez, author of a new and very intriguing book, Our Cosmic Origin. In it, he tells that Atlantis was created by humanoid beings from the Pleiades in the fifth dimension. They managed to integrate and maintain the balance between the spiritual and material worlds, and as a result, had a high technological development in harmony with the spiritual. The preceding great civilization, that of Lemuria or Mu, was highly concentrated only on the spiritual. They gradually began to lose touch with physical reality and the lower dimensions. This would raise the level of consciousness on the planet, which was their mission, but without the lower dimensions being well integrated. Atlantis was the solution to connect the low to the high dimensions and integrate the two polarities. According to esoteric teachings and theosophy, humanity develops through 7 great evolutionary cycles called root races, which must gradually develop the collective consciousness of the planet. Each root race has physical and mental qualities completely different from those of the previous one, as well as a specific mission to follow. Atlantis was the 4th root race and the first truly human and terrestrial race. Helena Blavatsky, a Russian mystic and occultist, says that the 4th root race arose about 8 million years BC, and she called it the race of the Red Man. But the beginning of the Atlantean civilization is shrouded in mystery. According to the esoteric tradition, the higher spiritual entities assumed human form and incarnated on Earth at the beginning of the Atlantean period. Therefore, they were divine men, dual beings, supreme spirits who took human bodies, wrote the great philosopher and esoterist Rudolf Steiner, who also added that their true home is not on Earth. The first period of Atlantean civilization gave way to a second and then a third Neo-Atlantean period, during which Atlantean civilization spread from its island homeland to other parts of the world. Each world age or period has been separated from the previous one by natural cataclysms, great earth cataclysms, of which the final submersion of Atlantis in 9600 BC was the latest. Do we know what the Atlanteans looked like? Theosophical teaching describes the fourth race as giants. Although their bodies were reduced in height compared to those of the Lemurians, they were relatively taller than us, and this gave rise to numerous legends of Cyclops and Titans mentioned in many ancient traditions. According to Blavatsky, the Atlanteans were the race that reached the pinnacle of physical development. She says, "Then came the Atlanteans, the giants whose physical beauty and strength reached their culmination in accordance with evolutionary law." In principle, the Atlanteans possessed a third eye developed during the Lemurian race, which had spiritual functions. In time, however, with the improvement of the human structure, the materiality and the corruption of mankind, the third eye gradually disappeared. Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic and healer, also talks about life in Atlantis. Most of its information relates to the last 20,000 years of the civilization's existence, but it also gives details of the early stages of development. Cayce says that people appeared on Earth in 5 places at the same time: the yellow race in the Gobi, the white in the Carpathians, the red in the Atlantic and American lands, the brown in the Andes, and the black in Africa. This happened more than 10,500,000 years ago. Based on them, we get the information that the 5 races were the sons of God mentioned in the Bible. The daughters of men with whom they made the mistake of mating were actually the original strange forms left over from the early attempts at material projection. The result was a race of hybrids. At the beginning of the Atlantean civilization, a difference arose regarding these hybrids. One group, the children of the Law of One, wanted to keep the human race pure but help the hybrids regain their position as God's creatures. The other group, the sons of Belial, believed only in sensual gratification and treated hybrids as slaves. According to Cayce, Atlantis disappeared in 3 separate cataclysms around 50,000 BC, 28,000 BC, and 10,000 BC. The first of these because of the use of advanced technology for destructive purposes, and the second destruction was preceded by fighting between the 2 factions. Then the children of the Law of Unity emigrated to Peru, Yucatan, Nevada, Colorado, the Pyrenees, and Egypt. During the last third period of Atlantis is the time when Egypt reached a high level of civilization and the pyramids and the Sphinx were built. But let's now look at another story, one involving the Galactic Federation and alien beings fighting for control on Earth. This account about the creation of the Atlantean civilization is given by Matthias de Stefano, an indigo child who remembers his distant past life in the Atlantean colony of Chem, current Egypt. Matthias recounts that Atlantis was built in 16,000 BC by the Aesir, a race of extraterrestrial giants also known as Anunnaki, between the Azores, Canaries, and Cape Green Islands. The Aesir came to Earth seeking a place to live and for digging precious metals. They settled in the Middle East, where they conducted DNA experiments with Earth people to create the optimal life form for the planet. The offspring of the Aesir and humans were Atlanteans, chosen for the truth and the only way for the Aesir to survive on Earth and preserve their knowledge. Over time, the Aesir split into 2 groups, one using humans as slaves and the other guiding and teaching them. The benevolent part of the Aesir and the Arcturians took some of their descendants away to protect them and to let them develop independently without the direct interference of extraterrestrial advanced civilizations. From them, 12 children were chosen to store information from each constellation, thus creating the 12 great families of Atlantis. The first islands settled were Kaifu, Cape Green, Acheron, Canary Islands, and Eunuch, Azores. The main city and center of the empire was called Hephaestus, and like Plato's description, it was circular in shape. At the peak of the Atlantean Empire, the islands were home to around 300,000 people, and due to their presence of Arcturian DNA, The Atlanteans had blue blood and kept their bloodline pure to preserve their knowledge from the Star People and guide the rest of humanity. If the Lemurians, the civilization before Atlantis, sought to reach a higher level of consciousness by looking inward, the Atlanteans were oriented outward toward the material world. They knew how to use sound and vibration to influence the world around them, and they built devices to transmit information and energy all over the planet. Through them, they could heal, regenerate their bodies, connect with other dimensions. Thus, advanced technology and cosmic knowledge of energy use gave the Atlanteans incredible advantages and capabilities. But as we know, every single thing is good only when it is in balance. And what happens when the balance is disturbed? Interestingly, in most of the various sources of information related to the direction of the Atlanteans' development, the stories follow almost the same plot. As receivers of the knowledge of Lemuria, the Atlanteans began their development from the spiritual. For thousands of years, they have followed the principles inherited from Mu, but at the same time, they have also achieved unsurpassed technological success, thus maintaining the balance between the inner and the outer. At some point, however, a division occurred and one part of the Atlanteans began to pursue dominance over the entire planet. They started abusing the technology they have created, causing a cataclysm. Some say a pole shift, others say they directed energy weapons at themselves, causing the continent to sink. In esoteric beliefs, this is the moment of the fall, after which humanity loses most of its energy abilities and enters the period of darkness. In our consciousness, Atlantis is remembered as the cradle of all that we can call occult and esoteric knowledge, precisely because they mastered the use of the so-called life force. For a long period of time, Atlantis flourished. Originally and from its inception, Atlantis was in accordance with the principles of Lemuria, which governed things according to the celestial order of light. All the sister colonies honor Lemuria as their motherland, for Lemuria was a representation of the feminine principle, based on freedom, harmony, and spiritual community. The early Atlanteans lived in a perfect society just like the Lemurians and worshipped the divine feminine in balance with the divine masculine. Edgar Cayce described the Atlanteans of the early years of Atlantis as thinking people, people of intuitive influence, who had access to the future and the past. How did they achieve this? By developing the right side of the brain of their children and by respecting their insights and dreams. As infants, we are more open to our psychic senses, not only because we're still very close to the other side of life, but our speech is not fully developed, so we have to rely on our feelings, senses to connect with the physical world. The Atlanteans easily taught their children how to use their psychic abilities and generally just rely on their intuition. As adults, some of them developed tremendous discipline of mind and devoted their lives to applying the knowledge they acquired. The lifestyle of the people of Atlantis also contributed to the preservation of their psychic abilities, as they were always in close contact with the natural environment. According to the Austrian occultist Rudolf Steiner, the Atlanteans were the first to discover how to convert the life force into a force that can be applied for technological purposes, by which many of the apparent miracles attributed to the Atlantean science were performed. Steiner describes this power as a power inherent in all living things, which manifests itself through the processes of germination and growth. The life force was known in ancient times as prana or mana. Occultists in the 19th and 20th century knew it as vril, meaning the universal principle of life energy, life force, or life magnetism. Control of the life force, or vril, gave the Atlanteans almost superhuman powers over the entire world of manifestation and other spiritual realities. With the vril, the Atlanteans were able to control time, manipulate matter, reverse gravity, while also providing unlimited energy to power all manner of mechanical devices. They developed a technology that, while different from ours, is superior in many ways. The wildflower fields and lush lush green forests of these beautiful lands were not disfigured by strips of metal and concrete to facilitate fast travel by bullet trains and automobiles. Instead, people managed to live happily without polluting the environment and depleting their natural resources. Edgar Cayce's readings, meanwhile, describe the Atlanteans gaining power from the Great Crystal from sound and from the splitting of the atom. He says that with the energy flowing from the crystal, the people of Atlantis enjoyed traveling through air, water, and under the sea, voice transmission over long distances, and the benefits of lasers. Will the time come when we will fly freely in space just as the Atlanteans? And how exactly did they extract and direct this life energy? Using their highly developed skills, the Atlanteans were able to obtain energy from a wide variety of other sources, including the sun, the mind, the Earth's magnetic field, and sound. Edgar Cayce mentions the first important crystal in Atlantis as the Tuaoi stone. The Atlanteans originally amplified the light that its 6 sides received from the sun to enhance meditation and contemplation and to communicate with the spirit realm. After thousands of years, as humans became more materially oriented, the priests perfected the great crystal which, when properly controlled, magnified and directed the energy it gathered. With the source of infinite power, the Atlanteans gained the ability to travel through the air, on and under water. To construct the huge multi-faced stone, the Atlantean scientists placed a large piece of precision cut quartz crystal on top of a building that served as a solar-type transducer. In this open space, the facets of the crystal focused the energy from the sun's rays, just as parabolic mirrors do today. A movable dome over the top of the intricate quartz stone allowed skilled engineers to control the amount of light exposure from above. The Atlanteans lined the building with the crystal with a non-conductive material similar to asbestos. Cayce describes a central power plant on Earth that provided the energy from the Great Crystal, allowing the Atlanteans to overcome gravity. According to Cayce, powerful beams from the Great Crystal sent the energy to receptor crystals which recharged it. From there, the energy could be used to drive an electric or thermal engine in a vehicle or other mechanical device. This was one of the several examples of the Atlanteans' ability to transmit energy wirelessly. Cayce also mentions that the big crystal could have received energy from the stars, from various sources in space. We know the Bermuda Triangle stories. Many ships and low-flying planes have disappeared forever without any explanation in the Bermuda Triangle. If the radios are working, pilots sometimes report that their engines lose power, that their compasses rotate counterclockwise, and that other navigational equipment behaves erratically or stops functioning. Suddenly, passengers find that they, along with their ships or planes, are in thick fog. Could a powerful crystal from the time of Atlantis be causing these disturbances? What if there is a crystal hidden below the water that captures the sun's rays and transmits energy the moment another vehicle passes over it? So far, we have explored the different stories and theories about the creation of Atlantis, its people, and some of the technologies they used. But what caused its destruction? Did this great civilization disappear as a result of a random natural cataclysm, or did they themselves cause their own extinction? Many believe that in order to more easily enter other dimensions, the Atlanteans tried to create a powerful interdimensional portal in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. This gives us another hypothesis about the communication problems and mysterious disappearances in this area. As we know, portals are doors to other dimensions. They allow us to pass through the veil and feel what is happening in another time period. Perhaps a lack of understanding of the lethal force of this endeavor contributed to the downfall of the Atlanteans, just as the Montauk Project was abandoned when our scientists were unable to control their experiments. The Atlanteans followed the principles of sacred geometry, and this could be seen mostly in their architecture. They preferred to build their homes in a round or octagonal shape because they believed that a round home was more harmonious for the spirit and believed that the geometric shape would better channel the energy of the universe. According to the theosophist Scott Elliott, the temples of Atlantis were massive structures of gigantic proportions, somewhat resembling the great halls of the temples of Egypt, but built on a much larger scale. They were built in a pyramid shape where the energy channeled from the universe was more readily available. For added power, they placed a powerful quartz crystal near or on top of the structure. These were places of regeneration and recharging, for when one is in a meditative state in a pyramid, it is possible to pick up the heightened vibrations of the structure and restore their energy. To use the energy portals, the Atlanteans used a key that resembled the human body, made of minerals. This key is known as the Ankh. When an initiate held the Ankh while chanting, the Ankh began to resonate with the energy in two directions, one positive and the other negative charged energy. These two energies created a neutral point between them that expanded and moved up and down, forming an ellipse shape. This resembled the way energy in the body flows through the chakras. According to Cayce, when the Atlanteans began their spiritual ascension, they wore pale green robes. Advancing through the journey, they changed their garb to light blue, and finally the white robes reserved for the highest orders. On special occasions, the unique dark blue dresses passed down from one generation of sages to the next. Healers that wore special headbands with a silver line were specializing in mental healing, and an orichalcum headband indicated skills in physical medicine or surgery. Orichalcum was the fabled metal of Atlantis, but its composition is a mystery. In ancient Greek, the word simply means golden metal. Plato says that orichalcum was something that in his day was known only by name, but was once a precious metal that sparkled like fire. It was probably an alloy of gold and copper or meteoric iron. Mentions of orichalcum of Atlantis appeared 600 years before the time of Plato in the works of the Greek poet Homer, who mentions it in the hymn to Aphrodite as a golden metal. And now comes the question of what exactly happened that things went wrong and the balance got upset. Did this great civilization disappear as a result of a random natural cataclysm, or did they themselves cause their own extinction? Everything in nature moves in cycles. The development of civilizations does not move in a straight line, but in the form of a wave. There is a rise and there is a fall. When an empire reaches its greatest development, we know that its end, its fall, is near. There are reports that during its existence, Atlantis suffered destruction as many as 3 times, the last of which happened about 12,000 years ago. And it was precisely this event that led to the complete end of the continent. So what caused this ending? It's hard to pinpoint one specific reason. Different sources give different reasons for the fall of Atlantis. Only when we put them together can we see how they are connected and each contributed to the end of this amazing civilization. First of all, is there any scientific evidence of what happened 12,000 years ago? Scientists have several theories about what was responsible for the catastrophic event of 10,000 BC. Most likely, a huge shock caused the planet's axis to shift, and this disturbed the stability of the hot, dense liquid that lies beneath its surface. Inevitably, the fragile bark crumbled and cracked in vulnerable places. Red-hot magma from the interior of the Earth shot up the great speed through these spaces and melted the bottom of the Earth. What then has exterminated so many species and whole genera in 10,000 BC? The mind at first is irresistibly hurried into the belief of some great catastrophe, but thus to destroy animals both large and small in South Patagonia, in Brazil, on the Cordillera of Peru, in North America up to the Bering Straits, we must shake the entire framework of the globe. The agitation of the Earth's axis, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and flood offer the external physical explanations for the sinking of Atlantis, but another source of the catastrophic devastation lies in the thoughts and inclinations of men. Could it be that their lack of attachment to our beautiful world, their selfish pursuits, and their immortality contributed to this downfall? Bashar, a multidimensional extraterrestrial being, talks about the fall of Atlantis in one of the channelings. Bashar relates that the final destruction was caused by a comet that entered the solar system. Its orbit crossed that of the Earth twice a year. For about 20 years during its passage around the Earth, parts of it fell to the surface and caused destruction mainly in the North American and Atlantic regions. At some point, however, a larger piece passed through the atmosphere and hit Earth, causing a gigantic tsunami waves that completely obliterated Atlantis as well as the cultures along the ocean coast. But this comet, according to Bashar, was no accident, and people themselves caused it with the decline of consciousness, corruption, and division. And those who began to invoke fear were influenced by the corruption of the concept of the illusion of power. Your psychic, Edgar Cayce, he called them the children of light and the children of darkness, and he goes into detail about what happened. It was the division of Atlantis. What led to the corruption of a portion of Atlanteans, and how did this division occur? If we have to summarize the chronological order, it will probably be something like this. Somewhere around the time of the fourth Atlantean sub-race, they gradually turned to the technological aspect. They want to control the whole Earth and time with technology through the portals. This makes them vulnerable to dark alien influences, the draconian Martians who take advantage and begin to manipulate them. A division happens, children of light versus children of darkness, Belial. The dark ones wage wars with other civilizations. The light ones realize that the end of Atlantis is near and begin to gradually move towards the colonies and prepare the lands for settlement. A cataclysm occurs. Atlantis sinks. Thoth and the other higher beings carried the Atlantean culture to other parts of the planet. At its very beginning, Atlantis was created as a place to unite all into one. Although it began as a spiritually oriented community, it gradually shifted to a scientific and a technological, technocratic empire. Between 15,000 and 12,000 BC, during the last sub-race, the Atlanteans ruled the entire Earth and the portals to it. It is believed that most of the pyramids around the world date from this period, through which the Atlanteans downloaded information from above and communicated with each other as well as with extraterrestrial races. How did the alien races influence the development of the Atlanteans? One of the great threats to Atlantis came from above. The alien races of the Galactic Council viewed the humans of Earth differently. Some believed that humans would be a unifying force for most alien civilizations, but others saw us simply as a means of experimentation. Over time, more and more beings from different star systems tried to explore Earth, and one of the groups wanted to capture the technology for controlling the portals. In the end, the balance tided towards technological development. Interest in scientific achievement gradually displaced the compassionate relationships, sharing of resources, and the harmony with nature that characterized life in both Lemuria and Atlantis for tens of thousands of years. Gradually, a class society began to develop, in which the knowledgeable were extremely powerful, not always to the benefit of humanity. According to Cayce's interpretations, for most of their long history, the Atlanteans practiced the law of oneness. They were compassionate in their dealings with others and lovingly cared for the earth with respect and consideration. Gradually, as the emphasis on technology grew and focused on scientific achievements, they lost respect for nature and tried to take control over it. Natural resources have become something to be used for one's own benefit. In the Emerald Tablets, Thoth explains, "In ancient Atlantis there was light. Yes, darkness too. It was hidden in everything. Some of those who had risen high among men fell from the light into darkness. They were proud of their knowledge, proud of their place among people. They dug deep into the forbidden, opened the door that led down. They wanted to gain more knowledge, but they wanted to bring it up from below. He who descends must have balance, or else he is limited by the lack of our light. They opened through their knowledge paths forbidden to men. Although the original intention was for Atlantis to be a point of balance between spirit and matter, things didn't turn out that way and the dark forces crept in among the Atlanteans. The story goes like this. According to the book Our Cosmic Origins, as well as according to the Terra Papers, there was a split in one of the alien races on the planet, more specifically between the Anunnaki. Marduk, the son of Enki, wanted to take control of the planet. In order to make a coup, he attracted to his side one of the ill-intentioned alien races, the Draconians. They were a faction of the Orion Empire that had long inhabited Mars, but after misusing advanced technology, they destroyed their home and now sought to take over another planet. The Atlanteans, as the most advanced human civilization on Earth, with the technologies for interdimensional travel and control over energy portals, seemed like the perfect place for the Draconians to implant themselves. Thus, under their influence over time, the leaders of Atlantis split into two groups. The children of the Law of One and the sons of Belial were called Sons of Darkness. Technology took a leading role in their lives and had a dehumanizing effect. People became obsessed with acquiring possessions and moved to cities where material objects were more readily available. They replaced mental tools with machines in a way similar to our dependence on phones and computers. Having further fragmented their consciousness into the physical, they lost respect for that which they could not perceive with their five senses and all that lay beyond the three-dimensional environment. The spiritual quality of life became unimportant to them. When they separated from their creator, moral standards failed. Anger, greed, hatred, and envy increased. Sex orgies, robberies, and murders were very common. The sons of Belial dominated. Edgar Cayce describes them as sinful, and in Critias, Plato says the portion of divinity in them weakened. Eventually, a natural disaster occurred that destroyed their civilization. In the book The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, the older Drunvalo Melchizedek claims that he receives his knowledge from none other than Thoth himself. He tells that about 13 to 16,000 years ago, like a bolt from the blue, a comet approached the Earth. A serious conflict was brewing in Atlantis. The sons of Belial, who were in the minority even though they held the power, wanted to blast the comet into the sky with their laser technology. But the children of light refused, believing that the comet was part of the divine plan. In fact, they were aware that the end of their civilization was approaching and had begun to prepare the places to transfer the knowledge after Atlantis was destroyed. According to Melchizedek's account, when the comet fell, it destroyed part of Atlantis, but it marked the complete division between the Atlanteans and gave the impetus to the sons of Belial to seize power on Earth. To this day, they began to build a system of facilities with which to build an artificial Merkaba similar to that of Mars, which led to its destruction. If the Martians had succeeded in creating a harmonious artificial Merkaba, they would have achieved complete control over the planet. The Martians erected their facilities on Atlantis, but as they did not have the complete knowledge of how to activate an artificial Merkaba and control their facilities, they lost control over it. The consequences were catastrophic and the lower dimensions of Earth were torn apart. Drunvalo says that the attempt by the Martians to seize all power over the world took place near one of the Atlantic islands, in the area we now call the Bermuda Triangle, and the reason for the anomalies that occurred there is a device left over from them, which is now still active. Did the comet cause the sinking of Atlantis, or the failed attempts to control the energy portals and the Merkaba, or both? There is a theory according to which 12,000 years ago a change of magnetic poles occurred on the planet, perhaps as a result of the fall of the comet. Could this be the cause of the global cataclysm, the rise of water levels, and the disappearance of this civilization? After the fall of Atlantis, some of the higher spiritual beings survived. In some sources, they are called the Osirian group. The predecessors of this group were the Resistance, the White Brotherhood's sisterhood, consisting of benevolent beings who opposed Marduk's plan. They kept their 12 strands of DNA fully functional and thus managed to avoid the cataclysm of Atlantis. They were led by their leader, Osiris, who according to some later became known as the Egyptian god. The other one was Thoth. In the Emerald Tablets, Thoth recounts, "The all-seeing dweller called me, Thoth to him, and gave me orders on what to do, saying, take all thought, all thy wisdom, take all the manuscripts, take all your magic, go and keep the manuscripts until the time when the light increases among men. You must be a light through the ages, hidden yet discovered by enlightened men. Over all the earth we give you power, but we are free to give it or take it away. Gather now the sons of Atlantean, take them and escape to the people of the rock caves. Fly to the land of the children of Chem." Then I gathered the sons of Atlantean. I loaded all my sunken Atlantis manuscripts onto a spaceship. I gathered all my powers, my many tools of mighty magic. Then we soared up on the wings of the morning. We rose high above the temple, leaving 3 of us and the dweller behind. Deep in the holes beneath the temple, down beneath the waves sank the great temple, closing the way to the lords of the cycles. But always to him who has knowledge, the way to Amenti will be open. Then we fled swiftly on the wings of the morning, fled to the land of the children of Chem. There, by my power, I defeated them and ruled. I raised to the light the children of Chem. After the flood destroyed everything, the Chosen hid in a place called Sur Meadow, which means magical place, and in time this place became a temple. This place is the Sphinx, also called the Guardian. Thoth, there are civilizations of time and civilizations of eternity. Deep beneath the rocks I have buried my spaceship, awaiting the time when man can be free. Upon it I erected a sign in the form of a lion, and yet human-like. There, under the image still rests my spaceship, ready to be retrieved if needed. Know, O man, that far in the future invaders will come from deep space. Then awake, you who have wisdom. Take out my ship and win easily. Deep beneath the image lies my secret. Search and find in the pyramid I built. Each is a key to the other. Each is a gate that leads into life. Follow the key I leave behind. Seek, and the door to life will be yours. I'm looking for you in my pyramid, deep in the passage that ends in the wall. Use the key of the weak, and the way down will open before you. I gave you my wisdom. I gave you my way. Follow the path. Reveal my secrets. Can we draw a parallel between the sinking of Atlantis and our modern civilization? The similarities between the last day of Atlantis and the development of our civilization are obvious and disturbing. In addition to the lack of respect for the gifts of the earth, the crime and immorality that characterized the last days of Atlantis are still widespread today. Achieving personal wealth and power is of great importance to most of the people who live in technologically advanced nations. Scientific materialism has once again taken over, resulting in many people believing that they do not need a relationship with their creator or a strict moral code. Will we be able to control the artificial intelligence that scientists are improving every day? And shall we not destroy ourselves by our deadly weapons? The future is not rigidly fixed, and we are in control of our own choices. It is up to us to avoid the terrible fate of Atlanteans. The situation in the world will not change immediately, but from observing the mistakes of the past, we have knowledge to create a society free from greed, oppression, hatred and violence, and where technology and wisdom are in divine balance.
In the year 1099, Christian armies took control of Jerusalem after a long and difficult war known as the First Crusade. Many people had traveled from Europe to fight in what they believed was a holy mission to protect the land where Jesus once lived. After the fighting stopped, something new began. Pilgrims from all over Europe started coming to the Holy Land. These were ordinary people, men, women, even children, who wanted to visit places from the Bible. But the journey wasn't safe. The roads were dangerous, full of thieves targeting unprotected travelers. In the year 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Payan came up with a bold idea. He joined with 8 other knights to form a new group. These men were different from other soldiers. They were also deeply religious. They promised to live simply, follow strict rules, and serve God with both their faith and their swords. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. They believed they were doing God's work, and they set up their base in a place with deep spiritual meaning, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This location was no ordinary spot. Hundreds of years earlier, it was believed to be where King Solomon built his famous temple, a place known in stories as being full of ancient wisdom and sacred treasures. The knights were allowed to live right on top of those ruins, in buildings that had once been part of the old temple complex. Because of that, people started calling them simply the Knights Templar. At first, the group was small, just 9 men, but their mission was clear: to protect pilgrims and keep the Holy Land safe. Their way of life caught people's attention. They lived simply, followed strict rules, and were ready to die for their cause. Soon, powerful people across Europe began to support them. Kings, nobles, and even the Pope gave them money, land, and special privileges. They didn't have to pay taxes, and they were free to travel wherever they needed to go. New members joined from all over Europe, and the Templars quickly became one of the most respected groups of their time. Their success was fast, and their reputation grew. But there was something strange about their early years. Even though their job was to protect travelers, the Templars didn't spend much time on the roads. For nearly 9 years, they stayed mostly in Jerusalem. Instead of riding through the countryside guarding pilgrims, they remained based on the Temple Mount, right on top of the old ruins of Solomon's temple. They were quiet, focused, and always working. But no one really knew what they were doing. So, what exactly were the Templars doing beneath the Temple Mount? There is a theory, one that has grown stronger over the centuries, that the Templars were not just guarding the Temple Mount, they were digging under it. According to this theory, the Templars believed something of great importance was hidden beneath the ruins. Some say they spent those 9 years exploring tunnels, excavating chambers, and carefully searching the ground under their feet. They weren't there just to live near history. They were trying to uncover it. It may sound strange, but the clues tell a deeper story. In 1867, hundreds of years after the Templars had vanished from Jerusalem, a group of British archaeologists arrived to study the area around the Temple Mount. During their investigation, they discovered something surprising: parts of a tunnel system beneath the surface. They found actual pathways carved through stone, going deep into the earth. According to the records from that expedition, the team also found Templar artifacts, including spurs, metal equipment, and tools within the tunnel areas. These objects seem to date back to the 12th century, during the exact time the Templars were based in Jerusalem. Now, this doesn't prove the Templars were digging. The tunnels could have been there before them. The artifacts could have been dropped by accident. But the combination is strange. Is that just a coincidence? Some researchers believe it's not. They point out that the Templars were not ordinary warriors. They were trained, disciplined, and deeply organized. They kept careful records, followed complex rules, and were known for building strongholds across Europe and the Middle East. If any group could have planned and carried out a secret operation under the Temple Mount, it would have been them. The mystery deepens further in the 20th century. A few modern researchers, including writers like P.L. Gaubert and Louis Charpentier, claimed they had found evidence of more underground structures near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, part of the same Temple Mount complex. These writers argued that the layout of the area showed signs of deliberate excavation from the time when the Templars were there. They even suggested that some of the tunnels lined up with known entrances from the Crusader period. But there's a catch. These newer claims have not been confirmed through official excavations. Much of the Temple Mount is off-limits to modern archaeology due to its deep religious importance and political sensitivity. No one today can fully dig beneath the site to prove or disprove what might be down there. When you step back and look at the big picture, the signs are hard to ignore. The Templars were given access to the most sacred ground in Jerusalem. They stayed there for years, largely out of sight. Centuries later, tunnels were found beneath that same spot, along with items that matched their time and identity. But why would someone go to such effort to explore under a temple that had already been destroyed hundreds of years earlier? Many believe the Templars were searching for something of great value, something lost, buried, and protected. Some say it might have been religious relics. Others think it could have been knowledge, hidden away after Jerusalem fell to the Romans in the year 70. Long before the Knights Templar became one of the most powerful and mysterious orders in medieval Europe, maybe even before they were officially founded in 1119, there were stories that a few of their future leaders had already heard whispers of something extraordinary. These weren't stories of castles or gold. They were older, deeper, and far more strange. They were about Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis had already been told for centuries by that point. It was said to be a lost land, full of incredible technology, shining cities, and people who understood things that modern science is still trying to figure out. But some people believed Atlantis had been real. And not only that, they believed it had left behind secrets powerful enough to change the world. According to some versions of the story, certain Templar knights, either during their travels or through connections in places like Constantinople, met a group known as the Brothers of the East. These were scholars and keepers of ancient teachings, possibly passed down from those who survived the fall of Atlantis. What did they tell the Templars? They told them that Atlantis had once been the most advanced civilization on Earth. Its people understood the energy of the planet. They used sound, light, and vibration not just to heal, but to power their cities. They lived in harmony with the Earth's natural energy lines, something today we might call ley lines. And at the heart of their wisdom, there was one substance more important than anything else. It was called mana. According to these ancient stories, mana was a spiritual catalyst, something that could unlock the full potential of the human body and mind. Described as a fine, shimmering white powder, mana was said to be created through advanced alchemical processes that only the Atlanteans truly understood. But what did it do? Well, pretty much everything you'd ever want, honestly. Mana could heal the body right down to the smallest cells. It could extend life, sometimes even stop aging altogether. It could give people visions, lucid dreams, and a deeper connection to higher dimensions. Some believed it made communication possible without words. Others said it allowed for levitation, invisibility, and even protection from disease by boosting the body's natural energy field. So when the Templars heard this story, was it really a surprise that they wanted to find it? Who wouldn't want a magical powder that lets you live longer, think faster, heal instantly, and maybe even float? But here's where it gets even stranger. Some researchers today believe that mana wasn't just a myth or a spiritual symbol, but a real physical substance. something that modern science is only now starting to rediscover. It's called monoatomic gold, and it differs from regular gold. It's a rare form of matter where the gold atoms don't bind together into a metal. Instead, they exist as single, separate atoms, almost like a fine white powder. And according to fringe scientists and alchemists, this unusual material has some very unusual effects. They say it can affect the human body at a cellular level, possibly helping with regeneration and healing. Some believe it interacts with the brain in powerful ways, boosting memory, focus, and even expanding consciousness. In fact, there are people today who claim that monoatomic gold can stimulate the pineal gland, the tiny part of the brain often called the third eye. The most surprising part? Some of these effects are now being studied in real labs. In the world of quantum physics, researchers are beginning to understand that certain materials can behave in strange ways and exist in more than one state at once. What ancient cultures saw as sacred or magical, modern science is starting to call quantum, and that raises a wild possibility. What if the Atlanteans were using technology so advanced that it looked like magic to everyone else? What if mana was a kind of spiritual technology, a material that connected the human body to the deeper energies of the universe? If that's true, then the Templars weren't just treasure hunters. They were trying to recover a lost science. To understand why the Templars cared so much, we have to look at the world they believed mana came from. Atlantis, according to legend, was a global civilization. Its people lived in great crystal cities that glowed with energy. Their buildings were shaped according to the stars. Their medicine was based on frequency and light. They could balance a person's energy by using colors, sounds, and even thoughts. But like in many ancient stories, something went wrong. Some say the Atlanteans became too proud. Others say they tried to control forces they didn't fully understand. A few stories even suggest they opened a kind of energy portal that backfired. Whatever the cause, the result was the same: a catastrophe. Around 9,000 years before Plato's time, so roughly 11,600 years ago, Atlantis is said to have vanished beneath the sea. Some say it was an earthquake, others a divine punishment. Entire islands sank, cities disappeared. A civilization that once lit up the world was wiped away almost overnight. But if Atlantis sank into the ocean thousands of years ago, somewhere west of the Pillars of Hercules, today's Strait of Gibraltar, why were the Templars so focused on digging under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem? What possible connection could there be between a lost island and a sacred city in the Middle East? When Atlantis fell, not everything disappeared beneath the waves. Some stories say that a group of the wisest Atlanteans saw the disaster coming and had time to prepare. These were scientists, engineers, and spiritual teachers, and they didn't leave empty-handed. They took maps of the stars, books written in symbols, blueprints for energy systems, and maybe even samples of mana. Their mission was to keep the flame of their world alive, even if their homeland was gone forever. So where did they go? Some say the survivors scattered across the world, but most believe their deepest knowledge ended up in Egypt. Long before the pyramids, before pharaohs wore golden crowns, Egypt was already full of mystery. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of a time called Zep-Tepi, or the first time, an age when gods walked among humans and taught them science, architecture, and the secrets of the stars. But what if those gods weren't gods at all? What if they were the survivors of Atlantis? Think about it. The oldest structures in Egypt, like the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, show signs of incredible precision and knowledge. Even today, scientists aren't fully sure how they were built. Some of the techniques seem far too advanced for the time period. Now imagine that the Atlanteans, carrying their sacred knowledge, arrived in the Nile Valley and quietly began to teach. Over centuries, Their knowledge may have been rewritten, disguised or mixed with local myths, but parts of it remained. And that knowledge didn't stay in Egypt forever. It spread. As history moved forward, Egypt passed its secrets to new cultures, first Mesopotamia, then Persia, and eventually the lands we now call Israel and Palestine. By the time the Templars arrived in Jerusalem in the 1100s, stories of ancient power, hidden chambers, and lost relics were already part of the local folklore. So, yes, officially the Templars were founded to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, but some researchers believe that this was just the cover story, a good one, simple, noble, and easy to support. But behind it, they say, was a secret mission. According to this theory, the Templars didn't come to Jerusalem looking for something, Atlantean knowledge. Many people believe that while the Knights Templar were living in Jerusalem, they spent 9 long years digging under the Temple Mount, and according to some stories, they didn't walk away empty-handed. It's said that deep beneath the stones of Solomon's temple, the Templars found very powerful objects. They were said to be tools from ancient times, maybe even from Atlantis, and they all had one thing in common. They worked with a mysterious white powder called mana, a special substance we've already talked about. According to some theories, the Templars may have uncovered not just one Ark of the Covenant, but multiple. According to these theories, the Ark of the Covenant was a series of sacred devices, each designed for a different purpose. Some were said to produce sound or light. Others were rumored to act as weapons or to serve as communication tools with the divine. In total, some sources speak of 6 separate arks, hidden in different chambers beneath the Temple Mount. Whether they were duplicates, fragments, or entirely unique artifacts remains a mystery. But if true, this would change everything. It would mean that the object most often thought of as a single lost relic might actually have been part of a much larger system, a system the Templars may have tried to reconstruct. Another object was the Holy Grail. Most of us picture it as a cup, maybe from the Last Supper, but the Templars may have seen it differently. To them, the Grail was a kind of energy tool, something that helped people heal, grow, and connect with something bigger than themselves. Then there was the Emerald Tablet. It was a flat green stone with strange writing on it. The letters didn't look like anything from Europe. And here's the strange part. Some said the writing changed, depending on who was reading it. The tablet was said to explain how the world works, how sound, light, and thought are all connected. If you understood it, you could use that knowledge to do amazing things. And finally, there was the Spear of Destiny. This is the spear that, according to legend, touched Jesus during the crucifixion. But some believed it was much older and much more powerful. The spear was said to help people make better choices, to sense danger, and even to win battles. But it only worked for people who had a clear mind and a pure heart. Some say it needed mana to truly activate. After these discoveries, the Templars changed. They started acting differently, more focused, more serious, and maybe even more secretive. It's almost like they had a new mission. As the Templars continued their work beneath the Temple Mount, stories say that what they uncovered wasn't just physical. Alongside ancient tools and mysterious objects, they reportedly found religious texts. They were writings that told a different story, one that challenged everything the medieval church had taught for centuries. The texts described a personal path to the divine and portrayed Jesus more as a spiritual teacher than a distant savior. Some of the scrolls suggested that he had a close relationship with Mary Magdalene, perhaps even a family. Others hinted that John the Baptist, not Jesus, was the original keeper of secret knowledge, and that he had passed down teachings that were later changed or hidden. These texts, which many link to the Gnostic Gospels, the Qumran writings, and ancient Hermetic teachings, painted a picture of a world where God was not a figure of fear or punishment, but a source of inner light. Salvation, they said, was not about obeying rules, but about discovering the truth for yourself. Such ideas were not easy to accept in the 12th century. These teachings could have shaken the Church's power if they became public. The Church, according to many accounts, did not see the Templars as simple knights anymore. They began to see them as men who knew too much, warriors with access to truths that had been buried for a reason, guardians of a vision of the world that made the old systems look weak and small. And so, from that point on, everything began to change for the Templars. Among their enemies was King Philip IV of France, a ruler in deep debt to the Templars, both financially and politically. He feared their influence, their independence, and the rumors that they possessed knowledge the Church itself could not control. This was the same Church that had once blessed the Templars, given them land, privileges, and even protection. On the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, Philip acted. In coordination with Pope Clement V, a sweeping raid was launched across France. Templar knights were arrested in their homes, in churches, and in commanderies. They were accused of dark crimes, of worshipping a strange figure named Baphomet, of dishonoring Christ, and performing forbidden rituals. They were tortured until they confessed. But many believe these accusations were only a cover. The real reason, according to many, was far more dangerous than heresy. The Templars had access to ideas that could break the Church's control and shift the balance of power across all of Europe. And on top of that, they possessed advanced artifacts from Atlantis that could make them unstoppable. That possibility was too dangerous to ignore. Overnight, the Church that once protected the Templars now labeled them heretics. From holy defenders, they became outlaws. But the Templars, it seems, had been prepared. Just days before the arrests, their most guarded secrets vanished. Gold, sacred relics, ancient books, and scrolls full of symbols and diagrams were taken from their strongholds. A fleet of ships, once anchored at La Rochelle, quietly set sail and disappeared. But even as their order was collapsing, the Templars' final chapter didn't end quietly. Because on March 18th, 1314, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay, was led to a public execution in Paris. After years of imprisonment and interrogation, he was sentenced to death by burning. But before the flames were lit, de Molay made a final statement. In front of the gathered crowd, he reportedly called out King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, the two men most responsible for the destruction of the Templars. According to multiple accounts, de Molay declared that both the king and the pope would have to answer to a higher power. He summoned them to appear before God's judgment within 1 year. The events that followed were unexpected. Pope Clement V died just 1 month later, in April 1314. King Philip IV followed within the same year, in November. Both deaths were sudden and seen by many at the time as unusual. Whether this was a coincidence or something more, the timing was hard to ignore. Some believe his curse was made possible by the hidden knowledge the Templars had uncovered during their secret mission. After the fall of the Templars, their story didn't end. It simply just reappeared in new forms. In the years that followed, new groups began to form across Europe. Some of them seemed to have no connection to the Templars at first glance, but when you look closer, the patterns become hard to ignore. In Portugal, the surviving Templars were protected by King Dinis and reorganized under a new name, the Order of Christ. Officially, it was a fresh military order loyal to the crown. Unofficially, it was the same knights, operating with new insignia and the same inner structure. Their red cross was redesigned, but clearly Templar in origin. Some of their members even helped explorers like Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator. Many believe they weren't just looking for new lands, but for lost knowledge from the ancient world. In Scotland, Stories link the Templars to a group called the Freemasons. Some believe the Freemasons protected ancient teachings by hiding them in buildings and blueprints. One famous place, Rosslyn Chapel, is filled with strange carvings, including plants from America, carved before Columbus was even born. Later came the Rosicrucians, a secret society that wrote strange books about alchemy, energy, and hidden truths. Their symbol was a rose on a cross, and they believed that true wisdom couldn't be found outside, only within yourself. All three groups focused on knowledge, not just religious, but scientific, energetic, and symbolic. For many, these were signs that the Templars' mission had survived. The names changed, the symbols evolved, but the goal stayed the same: to protect powerful knowledge, to keep it out of the wrong hands, and maybe one day to bring it back into the light.